Hello, Brian. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me here on my little podcast, Leap with Jackpot. Thank you very much for the opportunity to interview
Doing
you.
great.
How
It's
are
good to
you?
see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. For people that listening, Brian is my career coach, and he's been instrumental in trying to give me some form of direction. And I felt it was a good idea to bring him on to kind of give us what he does and why it's important. I'm not gonna give too much information about what he does. So Brian, can you tell us about your background and what led you to
Sure.
become a career
So,
coach?
as we speak now in 2024, I have been in the tech industry for about 26 years, which feels like 1,000 years
Hmm.
for anyone who has been in it
Yeah.
for long enough. But I haven't been in the same discipline the whole time. I was a software engineer for
Okay.
about a decade. I was an engineering manager for about 5 or 6 years. I was
Okay.
a TPM for about 10 years, and I've
Okay.
been an analyst in between and worked in BI,
Okay.
and I've been a tester. So I've played a lot of these different roles over my
Oh wow.
career. But
Okay.
as I sit talking with you today, I can confidently state my most fulfilling job was
Yeah.
none of those jobs. Those jobs they were great, and I loved the people I worked with, and they were sharp, and I loved building
Yeah.
things and shipping things.
Right.
But my most fulfilling role was actually
Right.
being an athletics coach with my wife for about 13 years. So she and I,
Yeah. You
yeah,
you told me about that.
yeah,
You tell me more about
yeah.
how that is connected? Because I
Yeah,
was always
so
very
she and
surprised.
I
Yeah.
met playing a sport. It was volleyball, and at some point, she decided to become a coach.
Okay.
And she said, "You want to come? You want to come help me?" And I was like, "No, why would I want to do that? That sounds like an awful, terrible, frustrating thing to do to coach little kids when we've been playing like high level sports." So for a context, like my wife is, she had a full ride scholarship to college to play volleyball, so she was a high level player. Uh,
Okay.
and I played maybe 30 hours a
Okay.
week in college, so I played a lot. Uh, but it was at a higher
Okay.
level, and
Okay.
I thought, why would I want to coach like 12 or 13-year old kids? Like, what about what I do would be useful to them, and wouldn't they be annoying and
To
not want
them.
to be there and things like
Right.
that? And I couldn't have been more wrong. My wife sort of forced me to
Right.
go, and I'm still grateful to this day that she did that. So we're recording this on International Women's Day, so thank you to my wife, who's been instrumental in the
Oh,
growth of my own career and my fulfillment and happiness, because I would not be where I am today if my wife had not forced me to come with her. The skies kind of parted, and I said, wow, helping other people succeed in an environment where they want to be there
see.
and they're hungry to learn and they're eager to tackle these
Right.
goals was was fulfilling at a
Right.
level I had never felt before, and it's why I became a career coach today now, and why you and I got to work together, a while back. So uh, I
Yeah.
went and found
Right.
it was wonderful to have that experience, but it was also terrifying in a way to say, wait a minute, I am terrible at predicting in advance whether anything will be fulfilling if I haven't tried it before. So
True.
I went and sought my
That's true.
own career
That's true.
coach. I got a coach. I was an athletics coach, and I said,
Oh,
what's going
okay.
on here?" And she helped me get the career clarity I was looking for, that I'm effectively put on this earth to help other people succeed. And
Right.
I want to do it in a way where I can help people in tech. So now I sort of combine these 26 years in tech and now these 17 years in combined coaching, so that I have this 43 years of experience to
Right.
help people in tech achieve their career goals. And it's been a very fulfilling experience so far over the past 2 years.
Very, very interesting. Because I noticed how you were able to come from the other side. So that's one of the things that I notice that you do so well. So typically what you usually see with coaches is, oh, you can do your best, you should do X, you should do Y. But now you've
Mhm.
been on this other side. You're not coming from the point of, oh, you know what? I think this is what you should do. It's going to be, tell me the scenario of what you're going through. This is what I think went wrong because this is what the manager is thinking. This is what management is thinking. And it's more like you're sitting on my side
Yeah.
now, which is very rare. which is why that pull towards you was important. So, what does for those unfamiliar, what does a career coach do, and how can one
Yeah.
benefit
So
from that?
coaching's not very common in the workplace, but it's very common in other areas like sports, right? You know, if you saw a bunch of kids
Yes.
playing soccer for fun, that's great. But if there's somebody who wants, if this group of people want to get better and they didn't have a coach, you'd kind of look at them funny. You'd be like, well, why don't you have someone like guiding you and teaching you
Ah,
these things
right,
that will help you grow uh, in this thing that you want to excel at?
right,
So that's really a career coach is like an athletics coach, but the goal is you. It's even better than having a team coach, because when you have a team coach in athletics, maybe so he doesn't get to play as much as he
yeah,
wants to because he's not the best player. But when you have a career coach, it's all about your
yes,
goals. Like, I'm not your boss with my own set of
right,
career goals to make sure I don't get laid off or I get
goals,
promoted. I'm here 100% of
right,
the time
right,
to focus on nurturing and cultivating the success of my clients. So that can be short-term goals like,
interesting,
I need to get more interviews in the next 4 to 6 weeks or land a tech job. Or it can be longer term goals like, hey,
right,
how do I learn to speak with authority and confidence and like get out of my own way? Because I tend to sabotage my own progress at times. So some of those problems are take
right,
longer to work on than others. But career coaches are also just a sounding board to help you identify how to help yourself solve your own problems. We will step in and help give you
right,
tactics in scenarios where the cost of failure is high, like an
okay,
interview. You don't get a second chance at doing an interview,
right,
but a lot of the
true,
times coaches are there to
right,
think about help you see problems in a different way that make it much easier for you to then know
right.
what you need to go do in order to achieve those goals. Yeah.
Okay. So I picked up a couple of things. So the first thing is you're right. If you were to go watch a football game or a soccer game and you don't see a coach on the other side, you are going to be terribly confused. Like, how are you
Mhm.
guys? What's the
Why don't you
strategy?
care enough to
Do you
have
think
someone there to
uh,
help you succeed?
are the coach?
Right.
Yeah. So is it fair to assume that we just think we don't need one because it's not in a field that requires a coach? Like, because the natural thinking would be,
Yeah.
why do I need a coach?
Yeah,
Why should
so
I bother
there's
with a
a
coach?
there's a couple of
What's the
assumptions we're
point?
working
Yeah.
on. One is my manager will be great at supporting my career development. And after being in tech for 26 years, like, I would say on the
Ah,
whole, I'm largely underwhelmed by the career support that I've received from my managers.
right,
And it's not because they're out to get me. It is because a lot of them don't necessarily have a
right,
skill set where they're a great people leader. They got into tech because they like the technical part.
right.
Some people got
Yeah.
into tech because they don't even want to talk
Good.
to
Yeah.
people. They want to write code, right? And then if you
Yes.
try to pick a good
Yeah.
leader in tech, it's harder to do because a lot of people get into tech for reasons that they don't want to interact with a ton of people. Not true for everybody, but
Yes.
there are some people who got into
Yeah.
tech because they're like, I don't want to have to interact with human beings. I want to write code and look at an IDE and I want to see my problems, right? So
Yeah.
I've also been fortunate enough, though, to have one or two standout managers that really showed me what was possible,
Okay.
that I excelled underneath when
Okay.
they cared enough to help me grow. And then I realized I want to do that for other people. And so doing that as a coach is
Right.
beautiful because you don't get to choose your boss, right? And your boss could be good at a great number of things, but one of
Yeah.
those things might not be helping you get promoted
Mhm.
or ensuring your work gets the
Yeah.
visibility it
True.
needs to get a good review score. So
True. True.
one of the
True.
things
Yeah.
that
That's true.
really fulfills me is I'm not limited by the people I work with because we don't have to have the same employer. So I think some people early in their career sort of
Yeah.
assume
Yeah.
their manager is going to be amazing at growing them. And if that's true, that's great, but that's very rare. It just doesn't happen as much as we would hope. So
Mm,
I'm here to help fill a gap compared to what the best managers
right.
did for me in my career over a quarter of a century, and
Right.
then between the gap of them and what the
Right.
average manager provides for career development. And I mean, and you can see it and especially
Right.
in cases like
Right.
where you and I work together, where you might not have a manager
Yeah.
why, and you still need help with your career. Like, who do you turn to if you're unemployed or you're laid off, or you're on sabbatical and now you want to
Yes.
get a
Yeah.
different job? You can't ask your boss about getting a different
Right.
job. They're unlikely to be very helpful,
Yeah.
because that's in conflict
That's
with
true.
their interest,
That's
right?
true.
So I really enjoy being an advocate, someone that can be in someone's corner, regardless of what company they choose to move on to next.
Okay. So good on that same question. In terms of what someone can benefit. At what phase
Mhm.
of someone's career should one look for um, a career coach? Because the for my own case, it was after I had gone through a performance review
Mhm.
and I was off the job. But it somewhat feels a little bit too late at that point because
Yep.
you're under pressure to quickly get something and you might not fully extract the benefits of a coach.
Yeah.
So in hindsight for me, at what point um should a software engineer or a technical manager or someone
Yeah.
seek out a career coach? I would assume it shouldn't be at a time when
Yeah.
when it's crunch
So
time.
certainly we can help when you're feeling overwhelmed and you're struggling to get interviews. I'd say of the vast majority of clients I work with now, they come to me when they see a problem. But like you said,
Right.
that's crunch time. They're getting 1%
Yeah.
response rate
It's
on
crunch
their
time.
resume. That's a lot of
Right.
applications to send out 100 applications to just get one
Yeah.
callback. So sometimes they recognize a problem and they say, I need help with this problem. So that can be temporal, but what the
Okay.
real value in coaching is in teaching you these tactics that don't just work to solve the problem right
Yeah.
now, but the next time you want to apply for a job, you can reuse a lot of these tactics in order to help you stand out in a meaningful way. So, to answer your question directly, when do you find a career coach?
Yeah.
The before early career, just getting out of school, I have a couple clients that are college grads or just boot camp grads and they have less than a
Yes.
year of experience. Those people, it's really hard for them to stand out.
Right.
So, if you're having a problem standing out and seeking out a
Okay.
job, getting guidance from someone who's worked with a lot of
Right.
people. I mean, you know this, but for your audience, I've helped 50 people land
Yes.
tech jobs in the last year and a half. So I have a lot of experience with what
Wow.
the current hiring landscape is looking for, which is different than maybe what we
Right.
experienced than three to
Which is
5 years
different
ago. So when you know there's a problem, then you
Yes.
should ask for a coach if you feel like you can't achieve that goal without assistance from someone else. But that's not just land a job, that could be career clarity. So I have some clients that are software
Right.
developers and they're like, I don't think I like coding anymore. Like, I don't want to tell my boss that, but I need to talk with someone in
Right.
confidence and say, what sort of
Confidence.
adjacent role might be more fulfilling for me than writing code, because it's not what I thought it was and I don't like it, but like,
Right.
what can I do? And so we might come up with a
Right.
plan for them to pivot to like a TPM role, right, or to a manager role, and that would
Okay.
require talking with them a lot about
Okay.
like what they're good at and what they care about. So that's another example. It's like you feel like you're coming up to a crossroads in your career and you're saying, I feel like I have to choose a path.
Right.
What better time to have a guide than when you
Right.
need to choose a path?
Path. And then there's also the last bit when you're going through a layoff. So the first one would be, hey, I'm just fresh out of
Yep.
school. I don't know what to do. Hone my skills. The second one would be, I want to do a transition, or
Yep.
I'm not getting ahead. You know. And then the last category would be people that have um, been through a layoff. And on the last bit, for people that probably be listening and
Mhm.
probably have gone through it, what are those things that you uh pass them through as you do your service? Just
Yeah.
just a summary of what
Yeah.
they need to expect
Yeah, well, first of
when
all,
they
to
do that.
anyone listening that is experiencing a layoff, especially if it's their first one, like, uh, yeah, like
Like
chin
I went
up,
through.
right? Like if you haven't been through a layoff before, it's hard to describe to someone else what it's like. It feels like a gut punch, and you're never really
Okay.
prepared for your first layoff. You need to give yourself some grace and take
Yeah.
some time to process the layoff. What I've told you, Sahid, and told other people, that a layoff is a career version of being
Yeah.
rear-ended in a car, right? 95% of the time it has nothing to do with you, which is at equal parts
Yes.
consoling and infuriating, because you're like, well, wait, why is it happening to me if it doesn't have anything to do with me?
Okay.
And the reality is, I
Could be.
was laid off from
Correct.
my very first job in tech, like, 22 years ago. And it was traumatic. I thought I was an
Right.
amazing performer. I'm like, why did this happen to me? Um, but I look back now at it as a
Right.
gift and say, you know, I believe people in general are worthy of trust, but under no circumstances do I consider a company a
Yeah.
person, right? A company needs to do what's in their best interest,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that they are thinking too much about whether to keep you or whether to not keep you. So if you can embrace that,
Right.
you can take more ownership of your career. So to answer your question, working with me often starts with like with most coaches, we have a discovery call where we sit down and talk about three things, like your goals, so that
Right.
I understand like what you're trying to
Yeah.
do and what's standing in the way of you accomplishing that on your own. And then secondly,
Right.
based on my experience helping other people with similar goals, what are the tactics you and I might focus on in order to sharpen your axe, so when you go down to chop down trees, you're
Right.
not like you. It's easy, right? It's easier than you've been making it,
Yeah.
so that you don't like go down to the tree with a butter
Yeah.
knife and say, why can't I chop this tree down? Right? It's not because you're not smart, and it's not
Right.
because you're not strong, or that you have a bad work ethic. It's that the tools you're using aren't the right tool
Right.
for the job. Yeah. And then
And your
lastly, we
tools.
come up with an action plan where we sit down and we say, okay, if these are the goals and these are the tactics I want to teach you to help you achieve these goals, here's what we would do.
Right.
We would probably talk about your strengths, just like you and I did. What makes you uniquely gifted
Yeah.
that we want to double down on in an interview, right? And then how to write a resume or how to network with other people, so that way you get more callbacks and you get
Right.
a bit of an advantage compared to an applicant that just applies on a site and doesn't do anything else. Um, and then work on storytelling. When I've interviewed hundreds of people in tech, and the thing that stands out for me is
Okay.
not it is not a test where we take the
Mm.
person who scored the highest on the technical portion of
Okay.
the interview. That's not how these interviews work. Um,
You, you know. You know what?
yeah,
Can
sure.
we talk about that a bit, so that people can get like a behind the scenes? Because I know you go
Hmm.
through this in your
Yeah,
sessions, in your paid sessions, but just to give a
sure.
summary of how
Yeah,
tech recruiting works, so that people start to understand. So, from when 100 people apply, from when they interview, just that, so that people get to understand that sometimes it's not just you. It's not a
correct.
it's not a you problem. It's not. So just give us
Yeah.
that
So
that assessment.
one thing to note is that most companies, not all, but most companies adopt what's called an open until filled approach, which is to say they
Okay.
evaluate each candidate applicant as they interview them without comparing them to anyone else.
Okay.
This idea of having like a very
Oh. Okay.
objective like rubric or scale to say, is Sahid good enough to
Right.
get this job, yes or no? And we can't compare Sahid to Sarah or Shritej or anyone else. That's not how the process usually
Oh.
works.
Okay.
What usually happens is it's like a funnel, right? So if you apply for a job, um, even though
Right.
a lot of articles will tell you there's a lot of ATS, algorithms out there filtering a lot of
Yeah.
resumes, most technical recruiters really
Yes.
think you deserve uh, them to be able to at least read every resume they get really quickly. Now, what that means though is that has
Okay.
implications in how we write our resume, because they're probably going to spend 30 seconds on it,
Right.
because they're looking at a lot of resumes. And so
Okay.
having a resume that stands out
Right.
visually, like not with colors, but in the way that it's easy to
Right.
read, like this is something you and I discussed in our
Mm.
sessions as well. But that the
Okay. Yeah.
goal of this resume is just to really
Yes.
get a recruiter to call you back, because most of the challenge isn't just getting
Very true.
someone to talk to you, right? So that's really the first step.
Yeah.
In fact, if you've passed that step, the some of the steps in the middle are easier. Like the
Yes.
recruiter screen is usually the next thing where you
Right.
talk to someone who's
Yeah.
not as qualified as
Yes.
you are and you have to convince them you're qualified and
You.
excited
Yep.
about the job. That's
Yes.
pretty easy
Yeah.
to do. Yeah, there's a
There's a
strategy we
strategy for
talk
that.
about for that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
I
once you've
understand.
gone through the
Yeah.
interview, here's the part most people don't know, which I think will be very
Yes.
helpful for your listeners. There's usually like a meeting
Right.
where we individually to talk about you
Okay.
as an individual. So if you've gone through an interview loop, like
Okay.
a series of interviews, there will be a
Right.
calendar invite
Right.
where everyone that interviewed Sahid will be in the same like video call or in the same meeting. And it's called Sahid
Okay.
Adipoju Debrief, right? Or
Okay.
hiring panel for Sahid. Everyone
Right.
sits down. A very
Right.
common practice is everybody puts their thumbs
Okay.
out, like Julius Caesar style, sideways, and then they say one, two, three, go, and then
Right.
everybody either says thumbs up or thumbs down, and then the recruiter who
Thumbs down.
scheduled the meeting documents how many people were thumbs up and
Yes.
how many people were thumbs down. Then they go around the room, 60 seconds for each person, and they summarize their experience meeting with Sahid. What did they like? What did they talk about? Did they have to prompt Sahid with any hints to help him finish the coding questions? What stands out? And
Right.
if they're all thumbs down, pretty obvious, like you're not going to extend an offer to Sahid. All thumbs
Yeah.
up, pretty obvious, you're going to give the offer to Sahid. Usually it's not all thumbs up or thumbs down, right? Usually it's a
Thumbs up.
combination.
Thumbs down.
And
Yeah.
so the hiring
Right.
manager often is listening to all of the discussions and maybe probing with maybe the one or two people that said thumbs down. Well, on my team, I don't think that'll be a
Right.
problem because of XYZ. What do you think? But the decision is usually left up to the hiring
Correct.
manager to make the call. So, it is not like
Okay.
reviewing all offers when you're selling your home and you have 19 offers to look at and you're looking at all of them at the same time to choose the best
Mhm.
offer. It's often not the most qualified
Right.
person that gets the offer. It's usually the first qualified person that gets the offer because you're evaluated one
Right.
at a time, right? Now, this is not true for
One at
every
a
single
time.
tech company. Sometimes, like at a Google,
Right.
the hiring panel is
Yeah.
by design not the people that met with you. Sometimes they are just reading what was written by the interviewers because they want to have
What
another
was
level
written by?
of avoiding
Okay.
bias, of like
Right.
personally seeing somebody.
Right.
None of the people on those hiring panels have ever met with Sahid. All they have is the notes that the
Right.
interviewers took on Sahid.
The notes.
But when you recognize it comes
Right.
down often to sort of this very subjective sort of binary thumbs up or thumbs down, it
Thumbs
is
up.
not that the person who scored the highest is getting the offer. It is the
Right.
hiring manager's call often on whether we say yes to Sahid or not. And in my experience, having been on hiring panels and
Yeah.
being the hiring manager, having hired people, what
Right.
usually ends up winning
Right.
is the person that's technical
Yeah.
enough to do the job. It's often not the most
Okay.
technical person,
Right.
someone who a lot of people
Technical.
on the hiring panel want to work with them. Like there's this very fuzzy coworker test. Like, would I enjoy working with
Right.
Sahid or does it feel like it would be pulling
Okay.
teeth, right? Or does he seem like a robot or a
Right.
jackass, right? If it's either of those, then no, I don't like. He might not be a good fit for
Right.
me.
And
But
no, doesn't matter how
he
well he
needs to
did at
do
the
good
coding.
enough, right? But in a way, the coding portions are
Good
almost
enough.
like
Okay.
pass fail. You can do like a bad job, a good job, or a really good job, but there's
Okay.
no real way to score over the top amazing in the technical portion because of the way the problems are designed. However, you can
Right. Okay.
absolutely score way over the top and stand out when it comes to the non-technical portions, like the behavioral interview questions, because those are so open-ended
Behavioral question.
that it's really hard for them to
Right.
contain the story you want to tell. Tell me about a time you had to resolve a conflict with a coworker. If you have a compelling, concise story that doubles down and showcases
Yeah.
what Sahid is uniquely good at, like what your superpowers are, the strengths that you and I went
Right.
through, that is a very compelling answer. And that
Yeah.
is more likely to turn someone to a thumbs up than
Right.
scoring well on the coding. It's not a test that you take to and try and be the top
Yeah.
scorer.
That
Because
you take.
if I interview on a Monday,
Right.
Sahid, and you interview on a Wednesday,
yeah,
you could be 5 times better than me, but you may never
yeah,
get the offer because they extended it to me and I accepted, right? If they could
yeah,
offer me the job on Wednesday morning
yeah.
and
That
they're not
that
going to not have the interview with you because they don't
yeah.
know if I'm going to say yes or not, right? So
Ah,
you're in this limbo. There could literally be
oh,
no job available for
yeah.
you. And it almost doesn't matter how good you did if I say yes, because there's no job.
Right.
It doesn't exist. Like you open the
There's
box
no
and there's
job
nothing in there
anymore.
to give Saeed, right? Maybe if the recruiter's
Yeah.
kind, they'll be like, wow, Saeed did so well. I wonder if there's other openings. But that opening you
The
applied
team.
for, if it's
Ah,
not there,
okay.
it doesn't matter if you're better,
Yeah.
right?
And that brings me to the other question. Again, you do this, in your sessions, but it's regarding the you applying. If you applied for a job and they asked you to,
Mhm.
essentially pick a date for an interview, you are of the opinion, just based on what you just said, is never pick a date too
Correct.
far
Yeah,
out
I'm a
into the
big
future.
believer in just like an athlete. So imagine you're an athlete, and like in
Mhm.
American football, there's this thing called the draft, right? And like all these people compete for the draft, and
Yes.
all of the athletes are in their top shape
Right.
because they're going to this very famous thing called the combine, which is where they get evaluated to see where they might fit in the draft. Now, some
Yes.
people
Correct.
used to play in the NFL and now they don't have a team, but they always have to stay in top shape in case they get a call. Like the way
Right.
to think about interviews is
Right.
to think about them as like, hey, don't engage with recruiters unless you're ready to interview like now, like tomorrow. Like, because if you say wait 3 to 4 weeks,
Okay.
it's like, have you ever been in a deli where
Yeah.
they give you the little numbered tickets? Like, you walk into a store and they give you the number and it says now
Hmm.
serving 17. If you walk
Yeah.
in to an
Yeah.
with talk with a recruiter and say give me 3 weeks, what you're doing is you're letting 50 people go
Yeah.
ahead of you in line, and if any one of them is qualified, not more
Yeah.
qualified than you, but just qualified enough to get the
Right. Then you.
offer, why are you holding the door open for 50
Yes.
other people to go ahead of you? The odds that all 49 of them are
Right.
not qualified and you are very low.
Right.
Right, that's just the math
Very
isn't
low.
there. Like it doesn't support that. So I encourage
Right.
you to do your leak code studying, practice your stories, get ready, and then
Right.
when you feel like you're in shape
Then.
and ready to be evaluated, that's when you engage with recruiters. And that when they say something like, do you have any times next week? That your response is, I have times tomorrow if you want. Like that you try and actually get them to give you a
Right.
time earlier than they may be even
Right.
proposing because it's a chance for you to go to the front of the line.
Okay. Okay. That's helpful. So, from your experience, what unique challenges do international students
Yeah,
face? Because I'm one, and international students or professional careers. So this is, a lot of international students listen to this. A lot of them are in grad school, about to graduate. A lot of them are about to. A lot of them are in their careers right now. Fresh out of school, maybe spent a year. They realized, wait a minute, I'm not being. Well, the promotion was 2%. I did a fantastic job. I got 3%. What betide me? What do I do? I can't. My
yep.
bills are increasing. So what are those
Yeah, so
challenges?
the cultural differences are very widely across the world, right? Like I went to
Okay.
university with someone who traveled a lot when she was in college, and she went to go visit a host family,
Okay.
and they put out a meal in front of her. And culturally, where she was visiting, the custom was
Yeah.
that the guest ate until they were full, and then the family ate afterwards. Okay. Um, and so
Oh wow. That what
I
country? What
can't
country is
remember
this?
where it was. I want to say somewhere in Africa, and I can't remember now. But this was some time ago. This was in the 90s, and so
Wow. Okay.
um, yeah.
I'll,
But
I'll look. I'll
she
look it up.
comes from a
That's
culture
interesting.
where anytime a guest, like a host, gives you food, it is rude to not accept it. So if anybody puts food on your plate, you're basically required to eat it, even if you're like so stuffed you feel like you're going to barf. So you take those two cultures and you put them
Right.
together, and they gave her like 4 or 5 plates, and she's like, what do I do? And the
Oh,
kids are sitting there waiting to eat, and they're like, is this is this girl going to eat all of our food? Are we going to go hungry tonight? Right. And she felt very awkward about it. And then she finally
Right.
had an open discussion with them at the end
Right.
and said, hey, in my culture, it's rude to say no if someone puts food on their plate. And they had a laugh about it.
So
But that's a case where what's normal in one area just can be the opposite in another area. So that's not just true
opposite
at
in
dinner,
another.
right?
Yeah.
That's true in the workplace. Cultural differences can have these ripple
Okay.
effects in the interview process, right? I have a resume example.
Right.
I've seen a resume from Germany that had the following.
Yeah.
You're going to freak out when you hear this. It had the person's name, it had their address, it had their date of
Right.
birth, it had their
Yes.
profile picture, and it
Uh
had their
huh.
signature. Like, and you look at that from the United States and you
Uh oh.
say, if I lost that document, I feel like I might be a victim of identity theft because it has so much information.
Let me information. Let me. What you just mentioned is
Yeah,
not weird to
yeah,
me. In Nigeria, Nigerian resumes. When I got here, the first thing I had to do was to do a redo of my resume. It had my name, had my address, had the local government
yeah,
area I was from in Nigeria, had my state of origin, had
yeah.
my date of birth,
Yeah. And
and my
everybody
picture.
says, "Why are you putting this
so,
on?" Like, they look
so
at you weird, right? They say, like,
yeah,
"Why are you doing this?" Because, like, to a US recruiter, they're like,
yes,
if you don't understand that that stuff shouldn't be on there, do I have bigger questions about your ability to
right,
understand if you can perform the role we're asking you to? Now, that's not a fair assumption, but that is
right,
absolutely a thought that goes through their
yeah,
head. So, you know, it can show up in how you tell
okay,
stories. A lot of people I work with are afraid to be too boastful on their resume, right? Where they claim these business impact. But if you don't
yes,
list that stuff in the United States in tech, it's very hard to get attention of a recruiter. They're looking at 200 resumes a day, you know, and if they all say, I
right,
wrote code, I wrote code, I wrote code, like, how are you going to stand out?
right,
So what might be boastful or inappropriate in
right,
some cultures may be a best practice in other geographies. And so it becomes very
right,
important that you get help. It doesn't have to be from a coach like me necessarily. It can be from a friend that you know,
right,
who grew up in that culture or in that professional environment, and have them look at what you're writing. This falls into a
right,
blind spot, right? It's like, and the
okay,
problem with the blind spot is you don't know that you have a blind spot. That's what makes it blind. So you
yeah,
won't be able to know
yeah,
what to
that's
ask. You
true,
have to show. So like you will this document your resume and you
yeah,
will show it to somebody, and I look at it and I go, "What are you doing?" And then we make it. We strip out the things that make it look like it stands out for the wrong reasons, right? Which are honest mistakes, but
right,
when a recruiter can look at 200 resumes, they're not probably going to reach out to you and say, "Hey, by
right,
the way, you don't need to do this." If they do, you probably owe them a coffee because like they're very
yeah,
much like overworked and underpaid people in all industries. So
it's
yeah.
true. So how can they being the international students navigate these challenges, especially in the new cultural and professional environment? You did allude to some of them. Well, what are the other ones? So things like if a recruiter that is nice enough can help out.
Yeah, so like
What are the other
even in the
ways?
United States, a lot of people will have different experiences with different kinds of recruiters. Like a recruiter for Meta, for example, is pretty helpful in terms of
Yeah.
telling you exactly the types of things that you'll be asked and the order of the interviews. And they'll actually give you tips on how to
Okay.
prepare for the interview. Now, if you're not used to
Okay.
that, you could get caught off guard. You might even be a little suspicious. Wait, are they trying to
Right.
get me to prepare for one thing and then trick me by asking me these other questions? No, the recruiters at Meta are
Right.
sincerely trying to fill these roles with top talent, and they don't want some minor easy thing that you and he or she could go over before the meeting to stand in that way. So um, so
Done in that
when
way.
when
Okay.
you're meeting with a recruiter, you should ask them openly, like, what type of relationship, like, do you like, what type of engagement am I going to have with you? Is this are you evaluating me, or are you supporting me and trying to maximize my chances of
Okay.
getting this role? Because some of them are the latter, but if you don't
Okay.
ask that, then you will treat it like the former. You lose an option to get a very experienced person to help you maximize the chances that you
To
make
look
it
through.
farther through the hiring process, right? So ask, there's a lot of uh, don't be afraid of asking. Like the worst they can say is, no, I can't offer that
Okay.
service. That's fine. But there's so many people that don't ask and don't take advantage of the resources they didn't know were available. So always ask. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, what are the key strategies that international job seekers should keep in mind? International students, um, in the vast mist of 1 million applications, there's usually this notion of I'm not getting I'm not getting feedback. No one's replying
Yep.
me. No one is my I'm getting rejections. Um, some of the things I tell them is probably target companies that already
Yep.
hire international students, as opposed to just firing resumes all around the
Yeah.
place. What are the strategies
So one
should they
thing you
keep in
can
mind?
do is you can do a couple things. So one is recognize you have blind spots, because if the culture that you're applying into is not
Okay,
one you're familiar with, and so I can't, I mean, I know we
right,
talked about this in our sessions, but don't ever underestimate the value of
yeah,
networking, right? And that there is a way to meet
okay,
people that work at the companies that you want to work for. And there's a large number of
right,
people, especially in tech, that want to help you, as
right,
long as you, when you meet with them, you
okay,
give them an opportunity to talk about their favorite topic, which of course is themselves. So if you give them an opportunity to tell their
right,
story
okay,
about what it's like to work there, and what they wish they knew when they started, or
right,
what are they, what pattern of behaviors do you see high performers exhibiting in your organization, and how does that
right,
differ maybe than other companies you've worked for? Like if you get them a chance to tell their story,
okay,
if you give them this miniature TEDx podium for just like 5 minutes and ask about them, not
mm,
about you, right? But ask them to tell their story.
yeah,
You put them in a position where they feel like they feel comfortable with you, and they're more likely to help you. And then if you just ask for
hmm,
some advice at the end and you say, "Hey, I'm applying
right,
for a job at Meta. Thank you so much for sharing this. Do you have any advice on to put my best foot forward
yeah,
when I'm applying for this role?" I mean,
right,
there are people who won't help you, which is a true
oh,
statement. But I've had
yes,
clients do that, and when they finish the networking chat, they realize they were talking to the hiring manager for the job
yeah,
they just applied for. Like they accidentally stumbled on to
oh,
the person who was going to interview them in a week. And when my client, who will remain nameless, when he did that
yeah,
networking
right,
tactic, he put himself at the
yes,
top of a list compared to everyone else, because nobody else stumbled across him, and it was a small company,
wow,
so his odds were pretty high. So like he was already at the
right,
top of the list, and it was his job to lose, basically. And so he went into the interview, and yeah, he got the offer, and yeah, he accepted the offer, and he loves working there. Um, but that
right,
creating opportunities for you to get an advantage, that happens
yeah,
when you network with people.
yes,
And networking should really be seen as this, it's like planting seeds, right? It is like you don't expect to get results when you plant
okay,
seeds tomorrow. Like you don't expect to be able to like walk in
right,
and grab something out of the
right,
ground. But if you play the long game, like if you do networking to help other people succeed in a way that they want to help you succeed, but
right,
you don't keep score, you're not like, I helped you, now you have to
right,
help me.
right,
It's really about creating a community where people want to help each other. And if you lead from a place of generosity, you'd be surprised what people are
right,
willing to do for you, and they'll remember you, right? Um, like I have
that's
a
true,
quick story I
that's
can
true,
tell you about. Like
S-
I worked as a
yeah,
contractor before I worked for Microsoft, before I worked for Zillow, before Coinbase. I worked as a
right,
contractor, as a vendor for Microsoft, and my contract was coming due, and they were like,
okay,
"We don't have any more work," and I was like,
yeah,
"Huh." Where I really liked the machine, like the PC I was using, because back in the day we didn't use laptops, we used like
yes,
desktops. And I asked
yeah,
the director of IT, "Hey, I really like this machine, and I have an old one at home.
yeah,
Would you be willing to barter like 30 hours of my time, or the value of this PC divided by my hourly rate, so that I can give you free work? and then I can just take the machine home when I'm done. And the director
Oh
said,
wow.
I don't know. I've never been asked that, but let me go find out. And he said, "Yeah, we're just going to put this PC in
Yeah.
a storage bin, and it's not gonna, and then we're going to write it. We're going to write it down on taxes, but I can modify it to make sure we
Right.
don't write it down on taxes. And in exchange, I would love to get 30 more hours of work for you for free. We just don't have the budget." So I made this deal. And then
Okay.
because I was there for another week or so, I was around for the
Right.
holiday party because like my contract ended in like early December.
Oh.
And so I got invited to the party
Okay.
because I was now employed.
We're still part of this.
I'm
Still on
still
you're
kind of
still
still in the
staff, kind
office.
of.
So I get
Yes.
invited. And then I talked to someone
Yes.
I had been networking with at the holiday party. Her name was Janice. And I told her my contract was ending. And she's like,
Right.
"Oh, well, what skills do you have? I have like 5 openings." And I said, "Well, what do you
Oh
have
wow.
openings in?" And she's like, "Oh, analyst work." And I was like, "Oh, I'm an analyst." She grabbed a bottle of beer. I grabbed a bottle of beer. We went back to her office and we did an interview, like dressed up in our
Right.
holiday attire, drinking beer,
And
right? And I got the job and I started the following Monday. And
wow.
had I not done that, I probably wouldn't have gotten the job at
Right.
Microsoft, and that probably wouldn't have led to where I am today. So, you know, be open to these alternative ideas, because if you can create an opportunity for you to get something that's an advantage for you, like why would you not do that, right? I didn't go
Right.
in to the barter thinking I'm going to get a job. I just did it because I wanted the machine, but it
Job.
had a
Yes.
really, really helpful side
You
effect,
were the
right?
machine.
Um, you
Job.
know, I was probably
Right.
making $38 an hour
Well,
there. I
that
mean,
that
I've made high six figures, mid to high six figures in my career. I can kind of trace it back to some of these
right.
events where I networked and I leveraged it
Network.
successfully, because I got lucky, right?
Right. So that's so it's very effective. How does one do
Yeah,
that, especially if you're new? I mean, you're new
you
into the
ask,
country.
right?
How do you go? I mean, one way I did
Yeah,
it was to
you
go
could go
for
to conferences.
conferences.
Yeah. The
Um,
other thing is like, if you know that you
what
have a
about
skill set that's
if
rare, can you offer it to other people in exchange for
yeah?
just some of their time, right? You know,
Oh, okay. Just like you exchanged your
mhm.
time for the
They have a
PC.
they have a resource
That
that
kind
like
of
that's not of high value to
that
them. My resource of time was much more
right
valuable to them than the
time
PC was.
valuable to them.
But in my
So you
case,
made
the
an
PC
exchange.
was much more valuable to me than my time because I didn't have another
Much
job lined up.
valuable.
So what happens really successfully in this
Right.
barter or this exchange situation is both parties feel like they're getting a deal because they value what you're giving them
Ah.
more than what they're giving you.
Oh, they
Yeah.
and it's the
So
flip
like,
for you as well.
for example, imagine I do, like I have a personal trainer and he charges me a certain amount of money per session.
Okay.
Now he probably has, he
Right.
needs to make a profit on that session, right? Because he pays a gym because he's a part of the
Yeah.
gym for that time in the gym. So he has a cost
Right.
and then he has a
Right.
profit. But uh, I had
True.
extra
True.
kettlebells like in my house that I had been using for a long time and I had no longer have use for them. I went to the gym owner and I said, "Hey, I noticed you don't
Right.
have these heavier kettlebells in your gym. Are you interested in these?" Now, buying kettlebells and getting them shipped is
Okay.
prohibitively expensive because they weigh so much. Um,
Yeah.
even so, you can pay
Yeah.
more in shipping than you do for the actual bell itself because
For the
they have
actual
to show up on
device.
pallets
Yeah.
often. So I said, "Hey, I will deliver
Yeah.
these to your gym because I live 5 minutes away. And would you be interested in trading these
Right.
for like personal training sessions?" And he said, "Well, how much are you thinking?" And so I ended up getting uh,
Mm.
10 group sessions, group workout sessions for kettlebells that have just been sitting in my
Wow.
living room for
Okay.
2 years and I haven't used them. So to me they're almost worth zero. I mean, I don't want to sell them for zero, but to me
Yeah.
they have very little value. But because I want to do
Yes.
these group training sessions are like $30 a piece. And so I'm getting $300
Peace.
of value, for
Worth.
basically like not having to listen to my wife yell about me getting rid of the kettlebells in the living room because they've been there forever behind the couch, right? So, but to them, they're
Right.
getting equipment that would cost them more money to get shipped, and I'm shipping it for free, right? Right? I'm
For
bringing
free.
it to their
Yeah.
gym, and now they can use those weights with their clients, including me, if they want to. So that
Right.
benefit to them is
Yeah.
worth more than just giving me a small handful of sessions because they get to keep those
You take
kettlebells forever, right?
forever. Yeah. On the questions of resume
Sure.
and interview preparation, can you share some essential tips for
Yes.
crafting a resume that
So
stands out?
this is something I've done a lot of work with, and I know we've talked about this before, Sahid. I've done, but for
Yeah.
your audience, I've done a lot of resume experiments over the last 18 months or so. So I've talked with about a dozen technical
Right.
recruiters. I've A/B tested resume formats and said, which one of these would you choose, A or B, and why? And I've done that a lot. Like, what about this? What
Right.
about this? What about this?
Over
And
and over
then I
time.
started
Over and over.
applying those tactics I learned, and that's what's been helping these 50 people land jobs or at least get callbacks. So, like most experiments, they are not
Okay.
always intuitive in terms of what we find out that
Right.
works. And that's why experiments are so valuable. I don't
Right.
believe anyone should trust me because
Yes.
I've worked at company X or Y. You should follow this advice because I've used it, I've documented the results, and I can speak to the impact that it's had. So, the number one thing I've learned, the
Right.
goal of a resume is to get a recruiter to call you back. That is pretty much its only job. You can talk about
Yeah.
anything in the interview you want. Doesn't even have to
Okay.
be on the resume. But the biggest problem right now
Agreed.
is getting the interview. That's the bigger challenge. So there needs to be enough there for
Right.
the hiring manager to know that you're qualified. So it can't be 100% for the recruiter, but like 70% recruiter
Okay.
and maybe 30% targeting the hiring manager. That's the right benefit. Now, when you and I write a resume,
Okay.
our default approach is to
Yes.
make it 100% for the hiring manager. We want to be impressive to the boss. And it turns out that's like almost 100%
Yeah.
wrong. That's about 70% wrong. And the reason is
Okay.
uh, the recruiter
Interesting.
can't read what you write when you write it for your hiring manager because you're using terms and
Ah.
phrases that a recruiter has no idea what any of them
Right.
mean. Like none of them. Like in fact, let me read to you.
That's
I have an example here. So let me read to you. So
okay.
I'm going to read one line from an actual resume that I helped with. I have approval from this client to do this. I just can't name who they are. Tell me what part of the following
That's
bullet
fine.
point, it's on this resume, do you think a recruiter understands? Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Orchestrated the
Yep.
seamless integration of real time data feeds into multiple microservices using Kafka, enabling up to the minute insights and enhancing operational efficiency through Python, WSGI, and ASGI web frameworks, including Django and Flask, reducing request latency by over 95%. So that's
Okay.
a mouthful.
That's a
What
mouthful.
part do you think a recruiter understands
That's
of what I just read?
just operational
Yeah,
efficiency by
basically like the last four
95% is the
words.
only thing
You
that would jump
exactly
out.
full marks. They
Yeah.
basically understand
Yeah.
uh, reduced latency by 95%. They probably don't even know what
Okay.
request latency is, and that's okay. But if this
Yeah.
document is designed
Yeah.
for a recruiter to get them to call you back and you write a bullet point like that, you're not
Yeah.
helping your cause. You're
Yeah.
making it impossibly difficult. The recruiter has to scan all this foreign language stuff, this
This the
gibberish, just to get to the four words
and then make
that
up
they
their
understand,
mind.
and that drains their energy. It's dizzying to read a highly technical resume as a recruiter. So don't give
Right.
them a highly technical
The recruiter.
resume. I think that was one of the biggest learnings I've had.
Okay.
So the other thing is recruiters see resumes that are really dense. You need to spend most of your time making your resume
Right.
like as concise as humanly possible. Um, like my average word count for the resumes I help people with is around 400 words,
Yeah.
450 words. That is not a lot of words. It is really
400,
short.
450. So if someone has a decade of experience,
Yep.
still
So
450 words?
maybe 500. Yep. So what we do
Really?
with people who have over 10 years of
Okay.
experience is there's usually an inflection point. So
Yeah.
the real goal here is you're trying to maximize what I call business impact density. Okay. So business impact density means you
Okay.
need to, in as few words as possible, demonstrate as much business impact as humanly possible, which means at some point adding the ninth or
Okay.
the 10th job, yes, it adds business impact,
Yeah.
but not enough to justify it being making the resume longer. So what happens is you kind of need to score each of
Right.
these jobs like on a scale of 1 to 10, and the average needs to be like a 9 or 9.5.
Right.
If you add an entry for a job from like 12 years ago and it
Right.
reduces the average impact
Mm.
because it's so lengthy, it shouldn't be there,
Back.
right? You need to
Yeah.
demonstrate like
It shouldn't be there.
discipline in terms of like how tight can you make this document? Like it is maximize the business impact in as few words as humanly possible. So if you can do that, you
Okay.
will show a
Okay.
recruiter that you care about their sanity because you can make the font size 11 point.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even believe in 10-point resume fonts, 11-point resume, like with Arial. And so, and bullet points.
Okay.
Like, and so I don't, this is really hard to do, which is why I help people with it. But when you can show
Right.
business results, a little taste of what you did to get those business results, and it's really, really tight, it stands out.
Right.
It stands out in a way that makes it really easy for a
Stands out.
recruiter to scan very quickly. Yeah. So there's actually
Okay.
I have a
Okay.
super helpful LinkedIn post about this very topic. It has a picture of food on it. So maybe we can link
Okay.
to it like in the comments when this goes live. And then
Yeah.
it doesn't
That.
have all of my tips. It has
Yeah.
maybe half of them, but it's got 9 important tips
Yeah.
that will help a lot of people
Okay.
get a little bit more response rate. Like a good
Okay.
example of when you need to be working on your resume is if you're getting a 1% response rate,
Right.
and you have 3 to 5 years of experience, that means your resumes probably need some work
Right.
or you're targeting the wrong jobs. But I had a client go from
Okay.
gosh 1.5% response rate to 30% response rate like after we fixed his resume. Now he had seven
Wow.
years of experience. He was a data engineer.
Yeah.
He's not a college hire, right? But th-
You're right.
this document can make a big difference, right? For him, it's apply to 10,
Yeah.
15x less roles and still get the same number of callbacks. Like that will
Yeah.
save your sanity.
I
So
guess.
yeah,
Yes, it would. It would. I want to leave the last question for you to talk about
sure.
your services, the cost. What does it involve? I've been through it, so I know it. But I want you to talk about it. I want it to be because I enjoyed our session so much, and I felt this would help other people. So feel free to kind of advertise your consultant service in terms of what you bring to the table, the value, because what people would pay and what they get out of this is immensely much more. So a lot of people always think, nah, I have to pay. So what do you do? How much is it? What are the steps?
Yeah.
And what do they
So
get out of it?
there's a couple different things I'll offer, but what I'll start off by saying is I know that people are frustrated when they hear this answer from a coach like it depends. And I want and but it really does. So let me explain why.
Right.
You know, yeah. Like
Fair enough. Yeah, fair.
yeah.
I mean,
So
you're being
most
honest. So
coaches
yes.
don't have a default solution that they like say this is going to solve your problems because we want to hear what it is
Okay.
you're struggling with so that we can talk about what is the problem
Okay.
that Sahid or the goals that Sahid has in order to achieve these goals. And so
Right.
you know, to give someone
Okay.
like a price or say, this is what we do, it's
Yes.
kind of like going to the doctor and them giving you a prescription before that you've even talked about what your problems are. Like you shouldn't probably take that medicine because like that you could be allergic
That's
to it.
true.
It may be the exact wrong thing you need. It could be really
Yeah.
expensive and you don't need
Okay.
that. Don't go in for surgery when Advil is enough to
Right.
solve your sore muscles, right? So, uh, A
So the
good
promo.
coach is going
Yes.
to say, hey, let's have a discovery call. And you and I did this, right? Like 45 minutes, an hour, and we go deep on
Okay.
your goals. And then we come up with, okay,
Right.
if those are your symptoms, what is the prescription, the solution that will meet those needs? Yes, it usually includes a series of coaching sessions. Usually
Okay.
it's 3 to 6 coaching sessions with me. Some coaches like to advertise
Okay.
like 6 or
Okay.
12 month coaching programs. I'm a little different. Like, I don't know if you ever interviewed anybody else
Right.
before you worked with me, Sahid, but I'm a more surgical sort of, let's look at the problem. Let's look at the tactics you
Yes.
need to learn so you can sharpen this axe and then go chop these
Yes.
trees down. And then
Yes.
once those goals are met,
Yeah.
if we want to keep working together on a new set of goals, so be it. And so,
Right.
it is hard to say it depends, but honestly, it does depend.
Okay.
I've helped a client with
It
one
depends.
call. In fact, I offer a resume
Right.
workshop that people can set up time with me. Like, it's on my website,
Right.
refactorcoaching.com. When you book
Yeah.
time with me and we
Okay.
walk through this, it could be like, hey, I feel like I have a good handle on interviews. I usually get an offer a third of the time when I do an interview. I just can't get a recruiter to
Right.
call me back. Well, that person, maybe all we need to work on
Okay.
is a resume review. I can just redo the resume. That's pretty
That's true.
affordable. That's like
Okay.
$250, like, for us to sit down. You send me the resume, we
Right.
we we redo it in the call, and you walk away with a new resume.
Right.
So that's on the small end. On the higher
Right.
end, I've helped clients for 2 years on and off because they came to me for career clarity. Then we found a job to help them with interviewing,
Right.
and then a year or 2 later, they wanted to get a promotion, and
Right.
so we're like, "How do you set yourself up for a promo?" So,
Yeah. Okay.
the goals may change, but generally speaking, most engagements
Right.
I do are somewhere between 3 and 6 hours of, like, one-on-one video calls like you and I did, and, teach you some tactics that are
Right.
relevant to the goals that you're trying to achieve. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and then the price
Okay.
does vary a little bit. I'm open about the fact that I actually charge entry level people, like early talent. I charge them less than I charge more senior people because it's, for one, it's fairer. Like, I have clients that make 700,000 a
Yes.
year. I also have clients that are making $0.
Yeah.
Like, it's not. I don't think it's fair to charge
Yeah.
those people the same amount of money. If I'm being
Right.
honest, value of getting
Right.
promoted when you're making 600,000 a year is by definition like 10x more than someone trying to land their second job
Yeah.
in tech. And I think the investment amount should kind of
That-
like be adjusted accordingly. So there are a fair number of people I
Okay.
have that are early career that pay a lot less than the people that I help that are directors or VPs, because I believe in the investment should
Okay.
really match the value of the outcome. You're not really like some
Yes.
hourly rate, which
Yes.
I think is
Which
a
is
big misconception. It's like, it's very easy to say it's this much and we're only meeting 5 times. It's like, no, the value of your goal
yeah,
is this, and I think you're in a unique
is this.
scenario. I've never been on a podcast with a client before, but like these things that we worked on, right? Like, none of those were specific
Yes.
to the job that you ended up really applying for. Like, that's 100% reusable for the rest of your
Yeah.
career. So it's not giving you a
Exactly.
fish,
That's true.
right? It's kind of teaching you to fish, and now you can reuse this
Yes.
for the rest of the time you
I can
want to be
reuse them.
employed by someone else instead of starting your own thing, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
True. So you still offer you
Yes.
still have the
So
free
anyone who's
sessions?
interested in talking further
Okay.
about the 3 use cases I help. So one is career clarity. The other one is I need to land a
Right.
job, right? I want a new job or I don't have one,
Right.
or I want to get promoted, right? And this applies for primarily for
Right.
engineers, PMs, and then people in leadership positions. So that's really like my focus. I
Awesome.
help people outside of that focus, but that's my
Awesome.
primary focus area. They can
Awesome.
book a free
So
discovery call if they just go to refactorcoaching.com. Um, uh,
yeah, I'll put it in the description so that as long as anyone listens to this episode, they will be able to jump on the
yeah,
calendar and book something. And I can guarantee that they will get the help they're looking for, because I did get the
Yeah.
help that I was seeking, and even much more.
Yeah.
I
No,
gained
I
friendship.
love, you
So,
know this,
and
Sahid, but I love
in
helping people. You know, I make
yeah,
84% less than I
yeah,
did before, like when I was in tech. So this is not
yeah,
a, this is not
yeah,
something I'm doing to buy a yacht or a mansion. This is something I do to pay my bills and get to do what I love. And I try to make it as accessible as possible for
lovely.
everybody, depending on their specific situation. So
Yeah. Well, thank you, Brian, and thank you,
yes,
Mrs. Pullum,
thank you, Danielle.
for helping out Brian here to push him towards his goal. Thank you very much again, Brian, for coming on the show. I hope you had fun as
Welcome.
much as I did, and I hope this goes a long way in building your business
Yeah,
and helping more
thanks for
people.
having me. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much. Yeah.